Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast, which helps entrepreneurs generate more impact, wealth, and success, attract others for all the right reasons, and become a smart connector, the architect of your amazing business and life. This podcast is sponsored by Virtual Non-Execs, the world's #1 peer-to-peer board advisor community, which connects thousands of investors, entrepreneurs, and advisors globally. Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. As ever, I have an incredibly exciting guest. Welcome, Lisa Smith.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jane.
Now, this is going to be a really fantastic interview. So, Lisa is the founder and CEO of Smithco, which is the premier sales consulting firm for female and BIPOC executives. Now, if you're wondering what BIPOC actually means, Black and Indigenous people of color. So Lisa's going to be sharing her insights on how a dynamic sales mindset can be the catalyst for unlocking your untapped potential and exploding your revenue. So we're going to get right into it. So yeah, welcome, Lisa. It's so good to have you here.
Great. It's great to be here.
So before we actually start looking at this very exciting subject of sales, tell me, how did you come to specialize in this particular area of female and minorities?
Oh, that's a great question. So inadvertently throughout my whole 30-year career, I've been doing sales. And as I talk about, and we're going to get into this today, I'm sure that sales is really just, I believe it's a mindset, and it's got a bit of a bad rap. When people hear the word, they initially bristle. But, I think I launched in June of 2020 during COVID, and I saw immediately, I had the foresight to see that in business to business, professional services organizations and companies, they were going to have to adapt rapidly because the way that they acquire business literally overnight disappeared. Mm-hmm. One-on-one meetings, conferences, all of the things that they relied upon, particularly very old industries like accounting firms or law firms, or, that it's built on maybe referrals or reputation, those sales funnels were going to disappear. Yeah. And then in addition to that, at the time, I was living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and that was unfortunately the epicenter for George Floyd. And being in the space where that unfolded and watching the reaction then globally, in addition to wanting to help professional service firms excel, I tapped into, I think, I hate to use the word zeitgeist, but I tapped into this need to ensure that underheard, underserved, smart, brilliant individuals needed to be lifted so there's equity. And so that meant working with female executives, BIPOC executives, LGBTQ plus executives, because they're doing incredible work, solving incredible problems, but often they can't get funding to do that. So sales is the vehicle to do it. So I just felt it's my mission every day to help those organizations thrive because we need diversity in our world.
We definitely do. And it is not just you saying that they can't get funded. This is statistically proven.
Correct.
That the vast majority of venture capital funding goes to white males.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yes. So you've got a fantastic mission there, Lisa. So tell us, how did you come to this before that? So what were you doing when you started your career, and how did it develop? How did your interest as well in this develop?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, I've been selling ideas. I think it really started with ideas since the beginning of my career. And it's been a very interesting path to business ownership and entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I actually started my career as a commercial interior architect. And so I spent 15 years working in a variety of industries, being exposed to all kinds of interesting, complex problems, solving those problems through space, through the design of the physical environment. And so I learned some of those skills, which then I applied in other areas. Then in my 30s, I went back to school to get my MBA, and I never thought I'd ever go back to school. I thought, I'm done. After I got my design degree, I'm done. I'm never going to do this again. But I realized over the first 15 years of my career that I was missing the key sort of language of business. I didn't understand when we were talking, for example, to a healthcare organization about a new hospital that might be $100 million investment. I didn't understand the language of business and why we weren't talking about capital investments and things of that nature, because we were driving this incredible change. So I went back to better understand that through my MBA, with the goal and hope that one day I would be able to own my own firm or be in the C-suite of an organization. I also did that to transition into sales, marketing, and advertising, because I felt like I had a more strategic approach to things, and I wanted to kind of be in that space, which was more upstream than commercial architecture was, to solve complex business problems. And so I did that for 15 years and jumped around before I started my company, like I said, in June of 2020.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So fantastic. Very interesting to hear about your trajectory there, Lisa. So tell me, why is it that you're so passionate about sales?
Well, if you would have talked to me, it's a funny question, because if you would have talked to me about even maybe 5 years ago and said you're going to be running a company that's specifically trying to work on sales, I would have said, you're crazy. Especially having been, at one point in my career, working in a purely sales 100% commission role, which I absolutely hated, by the way. I didn't like that at all, but I was really good at it. And I thought, there's a fundamental problem with the perception of this term sales, what it is, how it functions, why we do it. And I thought to myself, the funny thing is that everyone is selling every day, all the time. They just don't think about it that way. So what I like to use as an example, in a negotiation, when a toddler is trying to negotiate for ice cream in the middle of the day, he or she have a sales pitch to whoever is his caretaker or her caretaker to say, I really believe it's time for me to have some ice cream, right?
Yes.
Right. Or when you're looking for a job and you're promoting your skills, you are selling yourself. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fantastic if I could take this 30 years of experience selling in incredible environments all around the country and leverage that for small businesses for them to be able to thrive. And so that's kind of why I started getting really, I'll be honest, I'm kind of obsessed with sales, because it has such a bad rap. So I'm kind of on a crusade to change people's perception about what it is, so that they think about it and can own it in a more positive way, because everyone thinks about it very negatively.
Yes. And I think that is actually an issue that I've seen, particularly with some of my clients who are professional service providers, because I think if you're a coach or consultant, or you've got an offer that revolves around you, you have to sell it and you have to get good at selling it, because otherwise nobody's going to buy it. So
Exactly.
But I think what I see with a lot of professional service providers is that they have been, in a way, brought up to think of sales as a dirty word.
Yes.
And that their training and their qualifications kind of precedes them. And I think for me, that is the group that need the most help, because they just, to make that transition is, I think, quite hard for them. Would you agree?
I do agree with that. I think people, to your point, who are consulting or who are coaching or who are anything, you're not a lawyer or an accountant where things are very crystal clear about what you're selling and what someone's buying, right? I totally 100% agree. And here's the deal. The other thing I realized is that, I had the school of hard knocks of sales. I didn't necessarily have a ton of sales training along that 30 years. But we're not trained in sales. We don't, unless you are going into a corporate American job where you are going to be doing sales as your full-time role 100% of the time, most of us don't even maybe understand the mechanics of what makes sales up. So it's understandable when you don't know what something is that you're not necessarily going to be drawn to that, because it's, and let me say this, there are a lot of bad apples. There are a lot of people who give sales a bad rep. Right. So you fight that perception too.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I always tell myself that sales is service. If somebody needs what you
Yes.
do, then it is really just about them understanding how it's going to help them really.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Yes.
I definitely, I think because I've also had I have had some training in corporate environments on sales. How valuable that is to me now, I don't really know. But I think maybe I have less of an issue with it than a lot of people. But having said that, I do think that when people say no, where we always get no's, right?
Right.
That can be a challenge for everyone, I think.
Yes.
Even me, with all of my background, my training, my, history and everything else. I don't like people saying no to me. I really don't. Or I don't like people, don't like going away empty-handed after I've made a big effort with someone.
Sure.
And then that is a mindset thing, isn't it? Because
absolutely.
Then we can feel discouraged and upset and cross, and all of these emotions can come up. So I'd love to hear how you help your clients deal with those emotions.
Sure. And that's the key word. And that's why I use the word mindset, because as humans, we are making these decisions in our life and our business, everything, from an emotional state, not a logical state. But we use post-rationalization and logic to determine why we made an emotional decision, right? We're not, it's like breathing. We don't think about how we breathe. We're just doing it. So we're just making decisions from an emotional state, not understanding that's what we're doing. So yes, the first thing I always hear is that I don't want to be rejected, and it is part of the process. You can't help that. So there are many things that I work with my clients on to help them through the rejection, right? And some of it is just being prepared, being curious. I was just on a call earlier this morning and we were talking about this. When someone objects to you, your pricing's too high. I don't have the time. I don't, what data backs up that, prove to me that you can do this for me and get the same results as you do for somebody else, right? And we're not ready and we're not prepared. That's awkward and it feels uncomfortable. So much of the time I talk to somebody about, if someone were to do that, there's a way to not end the conversation. We can be curious and continue to ask questions and dig deeper, because in our business, we're building a relationship. It's not a one-time transaction, like a shoe, for example, right? And so I think understanding the market and your client really well helps, because you can get inside their head and start to understand, why would they be emotional about these things? What is driving them? Are they afraid of getting fired if they make the wrong decision? Are they, right? Because we're making decisions based on our personal needs in addition to our organization or our company. So why might they feel that way? Why might they object? Be curious, right? And continue to just have a dialogue, be open and listen and build trust. Because sometimes if you spend more time and you allow someone to kind of talk out loud about what the issues are, you can say, I see. Now I can help you with that. Ultimately, I think what you said, Jane, is so great, that when you're in professional services, you're providing solutions, and we just really want to help. So when we see a problem in our minds, we're already starting to see the solutions that someone that we're talking to can't see. And we have to stop and remember that they're not there and bring them along with us in the dialogue. So it's a lot of things. But first, we just have to understand that humans do business with humans, and we're emotional beings.
We are. And, so much of what you were saying was creating little connections in my brain. And I was just thinking about objections as well. And this whole classic thing about objection handling and how to meet objections. And I must say, I don't like it when people raise an objection, because of course I want my own way, like most of us humans do.
Right.
I was like, I just want you to say yes,
Right.
Of course. But what I do remember, and I think for me, this is the silver lining, if you like, is that often what people are doing when they're giving me objections, for me personally, is I think, you know what, that's a valuable little nugget about my offer. And maybe my offer needs to be stronger in this area.
Mm,
Maybe I need to incorporate something into my offer that
mhm,
means that I will not meet that objection in future.
mm.
So logically, it's a good thing. Objections are a very good thing, but I still don't like them. So I would love to shift my mindset, I must say, to be like many of our viewers and listeners, to actually falling in love with sales totally, rather
Mm,
than just loving the upside
mhm.
and getting, a little bit cross
Yeah,
about about people not buying or not.
sure.
Yes.
You know what transformed for me the moment that I really kind of it got locked in and I realized this for me. I had mentioned earlier I was working in a sales position where I was 100% commission. And I don't recommend that. I think we should dismantle that, abolish it. It's just not, it doesn't serve anyone positively. But I remember walking into a room to network and I just thought, I got to make a sale, got to make a sale, got to make a sale, got to make a sale. I was desperate. And you could sense that when someone is desperate or very, needy for a sale, everyone in the room, I'm not kidding, parted like the Red Sea. No one wanted to talk to me because I was so desperate. And I thought, this isn't working. I need to change this. And I said, you know what, Lisa, what if you try this? What if you just drop your agenda? Just drop it. Just talk to people and get to know them. And I found, this is crazy, but as soon as I dropped working my own agenda, I answered questions, I provided proposals, I did things, I still did things related to sales. I very quickly, within less than a year, booked $2 million worth of sales because I stopped working my own agenda and I just started trying to listen and be open and be curious to other people. So I can tell you that it works, even though it feels counterintuitive.
Yeah. And I think you make such an important point, because what is the greatest gift that we can give anybody? It's our attention,
Mm,
isn't it? I think.
mhm,
And if we are genuinely able to put our own agendas to one side and
mhm,
just focus on them wholeheartedly,
mhm,
they will start to glow, won't they? They'll be very grateful to us for giving
mhm,
them that privilege.
mhm,
And then that will establish that goodwill.
mhm,
And of course, one of my favorite books is one of my favorite authors, Robert Cialdini.
mhm,
So I love to study the psychology of influence and persuasion. And
mhm.
of course, that basically invokes the liking principle, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. And
Mm.
today, there's very little time in our life where we feel we are seen and heard. You and I
Definitely.
have the ability to talk to each other across the pond, so to
Mhm.
speak, right? Because of virtual technology, but we are very often not truly seen and heard. So when you give someone your true attention and you ask interesting questions authentically, knowing that you're gathering data and thinking about things, I'm not saying that, we're business people networking or know that we're networking within an environment, right? But this can happen anywhere. It is transformative. It's transformative. And because we were apart for so long, we just want to be together as human beings.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think so many people, they maybe put the sales hat on and they're just waiting to jump in. They're like, I must remember to say this and I've got to remember to say that. And
Right.
I always have to include this. And so they're kind of waiting impatiently for their chance to kind of jump in. And
Yes.
of course, that if you're waiting, then you're not focusing for that opportunity. You're not
Yes.
focusing on the other person. You're focusing essentially on yourself, and people
Yes.
feel it, don't they?
Yes, they do. Yes. And what I say to people who are not, not trained this takes practice. This
Yeah.
is not something, these are skills that any human can do, especially if you're introverted. And I'm going to talk about that in a second.
Ah,
But you have to practice them. And so that means that you gain confidence over time. But initially, when you're trying to do anything new, when you try to learn a new language, when you try to exercise, when you try to do anything new, it's hard. So you have to give yourself a little bit of discipline, give yourself a little bit of grace. But the moment you see the light bulb will go off, the moment you see that it's starting to work, and you just build momentum and confidence. So let me circle back to introverts. I believe, I'm not the only person who believes this, I believe introverts actually make the best salespeople because innately they are very good at listening and asking great questions, to your point earlier, Jane, about really seeing people, because they don't start on first. They're used to and more comfortable laying back. And introverts are really, this idea of introvert and extrovert has a little bit of different connotations. The way that I use it and think about it is that extroverts regain energy. They are energized by being with people. That's how they get energy. Introverts regain energy by being alone. So it's not to say, that's the term I use. So when an introvert, and you will hear this more often than not, I'm really introverted, but when I have to be on, I can be on, right? And so that's someone who says, I like to recharge alone, but I'm capable of having great conversations with people. But to do that, then I need to go back and recharge alone.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. So I think introverts are great. They're always prepared, and they're great listeners, and they ask great questions.
Wow. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is to ask you about minorities. Now, obviously, we women are not a minority technically, but we are actually in business. There are, if statistically, there are fewer women in business than there are men. We know that. There are few women founders than there are men. And obviously, when you're talking about other minorities, so you had a phrase which BIPOC,
Yes.
so Black, Indigenous, people of color, and you also mentioned the LGBT community as well. So obviously, all these people are in a minority compared to, white men, really, in terms of running businesses and so on. So what particular issues do you find that there are common issues across all of those groups, or do you think that they have specific issues depending on which bucket, if you like, they fit into?
Sure. That's a great question that no one's asked me. So I really like this. I'm thinking to make sure that I want to have a meaningful answer. And the first thing that jumped to my mind is something, and I might jump on a little soapbox here because I have some passionate feelings about this topic. I think because of when anybody is a minority for any reason in any group, you end up lacking confidence.
Yes.
Because whatever you are isn't fueling the dialogue and discussion, right? From your perspective, because it's different. Yeah. And I know the term, here's the soapbox. I know the term imposter syndrome has been around for a long time, and I bristle at that term because in my mind, it didn't start out as that idea. I've done a lot of research on this. It was really taken over sort of, and the idea that syndrome means you're sick, and that means that it needs to be, there's something wrong with you that needs to be fixed, and that's wrong. I believe everybody suffers at some point in their life with a lack of confidence. That's really what that's about. And I think that it takes you need to surround yourself with a good support system, particularly as a founder and entrepreneur, because it can be very lonely, if it's only you for a long period of time before you're building a team. Or like me, I'm a solopreneur. So I'm never going to have a team. I have consultants that I work with. So I need to find other people to help me keep my confidence level up. And so I think that it could be that you're the David and Goliath in an industry. It doesn't even necessarily have to be about your gender or your religion or your race or your ethnicity. I think it's a lack of confidence. And I think when you start to feel comfortable owning who you are and what you can bring to the world, then things start to transform. But we all have our own journey. We all have our own baggage. And that can be a tough ask sometimes. So again, I think the reason why I work on mindset is because this is really almost about working on yourself in order to make your business a success.
Yes. Oh, definitely. And so much of what you said resonates with me because I remember when I was running my brand identity agency, and we grew it from 1 to 6 million in around 2 years and sold it to US communications group Interpublic. And in all of that time, we did have female designers that worked in the business, but I was with men all day, every day. I mean, throughout the whole process, I was so tired of just going into the room and being the only woman in there. And it just is the way that it worked out. But I remember this I was also a single parent at the time, so I didn't have any support at home, really. I just had a pretty lonely existence. And I remember this kind of feeling of isolation, of just being so alone and feeling so alone. And I would never, ever wish that on anybody. So what you are saying about, getting support, obviously, men need support. I mean, we all need.
Yes, it does. Right. And we're not good at asking.
No.
Good at asking. Right. We're not, I don't know why that is. I don't know what's so complicated about it, but we're just not. I think the older you get, the harder it is. Right. And there could be a lot of reasons that are tied up in that. You don't want to look weak, or you don't want to look like you don't have it together. I think social media and Instagram in some ways have made things worse because everybody looks perfect, and, they're not. The house isn't perfect. The kids aren't perfect. The marriage not perfect. Nothing is perfect, right? We're all human. And so I think that if you can at least hang with other like-minded people, even if they are not in your industry or they're not in business, you can borrow their mojo for a little while.
Yes.
When you feel like you don't have any, because that is the thing that keeps you going, is your vision and your mojo.
Yes, definitely. And I remember once somebody said to me, look, if you have people around you, don't expect any one person to give you everything. That there are aspects of yourself that will be a perfect match for some people, and aspects of yourself that will be a perfect match for other people. So I have a friend who is my go-to person on parenting, for example, and family matters. I have somebody else who will be my go-to person, maybe to talk about politics or some of the stuff that I wouldn't talk about on social media because it's too controversial. But I still want to have somebody that I can talk to about that. And then, also we all have kind of multiple aspects of ourselves, don't we?
Yeah.
And I think when we can actually share those aspects of ourselves, and when we feel heard for the person that we really are, then I think that is bound to have a knock-on effect in terms of our confidence to represent ourselves in a selling situation and actually just feel better about ourselves all round. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, if we're going to talk about gender for a minute, I think that what's harder for men is that to build authentic relationships that bridge beyond business and go into personal. And I think it's hard for women because we have a standard that's so much higher than men that it's difficult for us to say we need help because we're supposed to be able to just handle it all. We're supposed to be able to do everything, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think for men getting to an emotional place with another man, with a group of men, it's very difficult. And I think for women, it's very difficult to admit or say, I need help with this. But the more when you do it, what's so ironic about it is that if someone were to come to me or you, Jane, and say, hey, I'd like your opinion or I need help with that, you would jump at the chance to help them, right? And so we are very willing to give and give, but for some reason, it's very difficult for us to ask. And so we have to get better at that.
Yeah. And, we are the nurturers. And, often I find in the business world anyway, or certainly this was the case with me, is that I often felt that I was being put in that box as well. So I was like the person who was expected to be the smoother over of relationships, the peacekeeper, the, inspirer, the decorative accessory.
Yeah.
I mean, really, honestly.
Right. Yes, the mother. Yeah, you're the mother to the staff. You're the one who's going to make it beautiful. You're going to carry the food. You're going to because we have done that in our personal lives and now it's transitioning into business. You're absolutely right. We need to be, okay, I'm going to do a Barbie plug. I know Barbie has been global. There's some really interesting things. There's a monologue in Barbie from an actress called America Ferrara, and she nailed it. Like Greta, the director and author of the movie Gerwig, nailed what it feels like to be a woman. So it's out there. If anyone wants to go check it out, she talks about it's this impossible dichotomy of things that you have to be everything and nothing. It's just this really interesting challenge that we are all in and facing right now.
Yeah, everything and nothing. Yes, that is, we're not supposed to eclipse men.
Exactly.
Uh,
Or
that
other women, right? Like it's this
no,
dance.
because that's somehow not feminine.
Right,
It really
right,
isn't. It's not nice.
right,
And, we are supposed to be nice. We're
right.
not supposed to be kind of forceful. Yeah, sort of a very ambitious, driven woman is not necessarily something that is admired in our culture.
No,
Or
but
say
no,
people have
no.
ambivalent feelings about that.
But I
Whereas,
think it's
yeah.
changing. I feel like there's a momentum that's changing. I really do. And I am so excited about it. And
Mhm.
if I can contribute to that in any small way, that literally is what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, there have been kind of massive changes. I mean, certainly, even, in the last 20 years, when I think about, the evolution of my career in that
Hmm.
media and entertainment environment, I still think it's a tough environment.
It is.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. In fact, creative services of any kind is very competitive, very cutthroat. It is. And obviously, because you also worked in a creative field. But I do think that when I look at my children who are now in their 20s and I look
Mhm.
at what they're doing and how they're working, and I look at the acceptance of difference amongst their generation, it is huge compared to when I was their age.
Mhm.
It really is.
Mhm.
Diversity. I think for those younger people, they have grown up with people talking about all sorts of issues,
Mhm.
and they just accept it in a way that my generation didn't.
Mhm. Mhm. I agree. Same thing. I think we're peers. My son's going to be 24. So I agree with that. I'm really hopeful. I have to stay hopeful. Otherwise, there are too many other things that will drag us down. But
Yeah, yeah.
I see the change, and I see there's things that are not, I mean, here in the States, things have gone backwards. So there are many things that we have to go back and redo again. And I can't believe we have to do that. But I also see the positive. I see where women are making strides and BIPOC organizations are making strides and LGBTQ are, starting to make strides. And that makes me excited.
Yeah, that's amazing. So do you have any, real kind of nitty-gritty kind of sales tips then, Lisa? I'm sure
Sure.
you've got a ton of them up your sleeve. So
I do. So if you are running a business, this is what I have found. There are typically 5 blind spots that
Mm.
everyone has towards sales, and I'll outline them real quick for you. So most people start and they don't actually, and I've made all these, I have, as a business owner, I'm going to say I've made these mistakes too. So I am with everyone in this journey. You typically don't document any kind of process. So you don't, it's difficult to repeat because everything's bespoke because you're reinventing it every time. So I
Mm.
think that defining a sales process, even if you write it down on a napkin, that you can start to repeat and become more efficient, gives you more time back. And we all
Yeah.
need more time. Secondly, I think that most people don't understand who their ideal target customer is.
Mm.
Who do you really want to work with and why? And when
Mm.
we talked about mindset and emotions earlier, when you really know, I know what it feels like to be a female business owner because I am one and I hang around with a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I can understand where their fear and objections are because I can be inside their mind. And so I think when you understand your ideal target, you're more efficient and effective because what you say resonates with their fears, their pains, the gains they want to see, the jobs they have to do. So, taking some time to kind of figure that out. Some people like to create an avatar or, a persona. They name them. Mine is Ingrid, right? So and document certain attributes around her. So I know where to find her. The other thing that I like to say is that it helps you when you are doing marketing or, trying to use advertising because you can find those individuals because you know where to look. It's like in a crowd, the way I describe it, people are wearing a purple hat. And so I can just go and find all the people in the purple hat, and those are the people that I want to talk to. The third thing is that a lot of people, and I think that you brought this up earlier, a lot of people are scared of or bad at follow up. They may
Mm.
have an incredible conversation with someone, and then either they got busy, they had to put out fires, it didn't dawn on them, they didn't have a process, or they didn't want to feel pushy. A lot of people don't do follow-up because they feel like they're being pushy and aggressive.
Yes.
And you don't have to be pushy and aggressive. Here's another analogy I like to use. So often we are so busy. We need to be reminded of some of the things that problems we're still trying to solve.
Yes.
So in follow-up, what I like to do is say, depending on the funnel, I will say, I just wanted to remind you that I thought we had an incredible conversation, and I'm here if you have any questions. Right? So it's not a hard sell. It's not, it's just reminding you like, oh, I wanted to remind you that I gave you that proposal. If you want to take a look at that, or if you have any questions, I'm here for you.
Oh, I love that.
Because, often things fall off your radar and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I call it being pleasantly persistent. I thank you for reminding me. I forgot all about that email. Let me circle back and do that. And that's a way that you can follow up without being aggressive and pushy and intrusive.
Yeah, I like it.
So the fourth thing, 4 of 5, the fourth thing is that sometimes I think that we can get, and now we have AI, an over-reliance on technology, that we might use technology to automate our process, or, and then we're over-reliant on it and we lose the human factor, right? We've just spent how long talking about humans and how complex we are together. So technology is great, but you don't want to rely too heavily on it. And the fifth thing I would say is that often people do not collect any data at all. So how do you know what's working and what isn't working in your sales process if you don't track information?
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be a sophisticated dashboard. Again, these things can be anecdotal, but it allows you to pivot and make changes before things are done. So instead of waiting until all the sales are booked and Q4 is over and you haven't met your goals, if you're tracking information above and beyond just how much sales do I have right now, my cash flow right now, it allows you to be nimble. So those tend to be those blind spots that almost every business owner has.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. And I think we always have to look for patterns, don't we?
Absolutely.
Patterns and trends, because that is the most valuable information that we can have, really, isn't it, to work with?
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I mean, Lisa, it really has been such an incredible privilege and a pleasure to have you talk with us on this amazing topic. So if our audience wanted to get in touch with you personally, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, thank you again for having me. It's just been fantastic. The best way to reach me is connect with me on LinkedIn, Smith Co Sales. Just look for Smith Co Sales. That's CO. And you'll be able to find me. We'll connect. We can chat, start a dialogue. That would be fantastic.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and look forward to getting the episode out.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a great week yourself.
Bye for now. Jane Bayler is the Smart Connector, a London-based, passionate serial entrepreneur, brand marketer and business growth exploder who helps overlooked and undervalued consultants and sector experts generate consistent, scalable revenues through becoming the go-to choice of their dream clients. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate you liking, rating, and reviewing the podcast on the platform you've heard it on. And check out the links in the show notes if you'd like to connect with Jane or any of her guests in person. Thank you for listening and come back soon.